that's personal to me and that I feel many people suffer from but may be too embarrassed to discuss. This is a conversation about battling the stigma of accepting mental illness, chasing a proper diagnosis, and dealing with its impact. We've already met our guests, but before we get into this discussion, I want to remind you to click that little subscribe button below and turn on the notifications to be notified each time we have a new show.
And
Not
don't forget to leave a good comment.
Yes, absolutely. Not only do we have this show, but we have our new series, State of the Black Men's Mental Health, and we're launching our women's series, The Wellness Collective. And trust, you do not want to miss either of these conversations. So, we've met our guests. Can you guys take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourselves? Any particular order?
Go ahead, Joanne.
All right. So I am a clinical psychologist and licensed mental health counselor. Currently out here serving our nation's veterans at the Manchester VA in New Hampshire. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm an entrepreneur, small business owner, business manager, professional athletes, soon to be NFL agent.
Hey, big moves.
Awesome.
Congratulations, sir.
Oh.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. It's so awesome to meet y'all. At the time of creating this discussion, after talking with multiple behavioral health professionals for a proper diagnosis, I still had to wait 2 weeks, which turned into 2 months, to get answers as to why my brain wasn't working like it used to. The catalyst was that I misplaced my prescription while traveling. Um, in addition to that, it took almost a month for my insurance, my prescription provider, and the doctor to refill my meds. Have you personally been affected or seen someone close to you impacted by starting a medication or impacted by medication based on their diagnosis?
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, yeah, I think that with a lot of mental health situations, with medication, people looking for an easy fix. They're looking for like an instantaneous, like you pop the pill, and then you automatically get out of depression or anxiety, and not understanding that most most mental health medications are something that are taken over time. There's a lot of trial and error. So I've seen like the panic in the beginning. I've seen the doubt and and then the scariest thing is like, well, I'm going to take it for a little while. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to throw it away, which is probably the most dangerous thing you can do.
Right.
So I've definitely seen.
Yeah, and especially in creating this episode. So, little background is Ashley and I started working. So we started doing pre-production. I want to say what October-ish, and this is right after her trip to Kenya, Zanzibar, and Tanzania, and it just felt like I was offending her every time we would speak, and so I started to feel as though that things were just kind of off. And we've had 2 great seasons of pre-production and being able to like gel very well. And it got to a point where I really felt like every time I said something, I was offending her, right? And once again, Ashley also, I mean, it's weird because we are talking about mental health. This is a show about being open, but there was still the fear of, and I can't speak for Ashley. There was still that misinformation of, hey guys, I've been off my meds for a while.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, as she'll put it, she was in a kind of manic state, like loss of concentration, just mood swings. And these were her words, not my words, right? And it was getting to a point where I felt like every production call we needed a mediator, right?
Mhm.
And luckily we had the amazing Deb, who was able to kind of like speak purge and then speak purge / page for those of you that know me differently. And then speak Ashley and find a way for us to kind of like communicate and get the work done.
Mhm.
Because I would say something and it would just seem like I'm going against what she was trying to do. And it wasn't till I want to say what, January, right? So we went through this for like a couple months. And it wasn't until January she was like, look, I just went to my doctor. I realized I haven't been like communicating what I've been going
Mhm.
through, and I realized one, I didn't realize the effect of not taking my meds so long, and then two, after going to my doctor, I realized I was misdiagnosed in the first place.
Mhm.
And so, one of the things that her medication was doing was before our shows, Ashley, you were taking your medication and it was kind of making her drift, right? And so, a lot of the times, guests would say, "Hey, Paige, after the fact, you should let Ashley speak a little bit more," not realizing it's like, "Hey, I'm trying to," but the medication really had her in a groggy state.
Yeah.
And having had that conversation, I was like, "Yo, would you be open and willing to kind of talk about this?" Because one, if we can't be vulnerable to our audience about what we're experiencing, we're kind of become the show becomes a farce, right? And so only when we put ourselves in a vulnerable state will others be willing and open to be in a vulnerable state. So that's kind of how this show came about for this episode. And we definitely appreciate you both for jumping on and kind of, chiming in. So
Yeah.
I think you had something to say, Julian or Ashley.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sorry, Julian, for cutting in on you. It was crazy because I can't even remember. I think this episode was supposed to be about something about blackness and blackness. And it was this exact episode, and I was like, you would say something, and I'm like, what? And I'm trying to record it, and I literally was like, Paige, I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad. And then told you, and it's crazy because it was an accident that I even found out that I was misdiagnosed. I was actually trying not to pay the pet fee for my dog, and I did one of those online things to get a emotional support animal letter, and they
Mhm.
sent the letter like within like 5 minutes, but then the lady was like, "We need to follow up with you. You may be manic." So then it was a matter of like finding doctors and finding different things like that. Julian, we were talking before the show, and I know you have a lot to say about that. So I just want to segue into your
Sure.
piece.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And kind of like you, Paige, I was saying how there was a similar situation too, where my wife, she's diagnosed with bipolar disorder, ADHD, and we had our ups and downs in trying to get the correct medication, trying to even get an evaluation. And some things I was telling Ashley beforehand is, you know, a lot of people suffer from misdiagnosis mainly because they're not getting any type of comprehensive evaluations. In the medical world, if there's an issue, you get a blood test and then we try to figure it out. In the mental health world, a lot of times they're just like slapping labels on you, slapping medication, let's see what works. And it's like, hello, how about we, take this step by step? And that does a disservice to people, like you're saying, Ashley. Like it does you a disservice because you're not getting the adequate help that you need for whatever it is that's going on to address your true issues.
Hmm. I think it's interesting that you say that because after that test, of course, in my mind, like I can help people, but I can't be the one with bipolar because I just started this organization and people are not going to trust the things that I'm saying. Paige ain't going to listen to me no more. Nobody's going to believe me because now I'm just this crazy person. So I'm doing all this
And
research. I took like 6 different assessments on every psychology website. Like I can't be it. Then all of them, every last one, like back to back, like you may be manic, you may be manic,
hmm
you may be hopeless, you may be manic. And I'm like, oh God, oh goodness, my life is falling apart. And I was like, okay, so I have to deal with this. And so when I finally did get a psychiatrist, a black, she actually has ADHD. She's an ADHD psychiatrist. She explained to me that one, she's not going to prescribe me something until I'm actually diagnosed.
hmm
And she explained to me who I needed to talk to, what I needed to request, what I needed to do. Um, I think that I had to take a test. I took 5 tests. One of them had 300 and something questions. I think that
The
that's something.
personality assessment.
I think that's something in our community people are overlooking. We don't know what these diseases are because of the misconceptions that are out there, and then we just think that, oh, I fly off the handle, I must be bipolar, and
Uh,
that's
Go ahead.
No, no, I was
We're
gonna
talking
say.
about off the handle.
Yeah.
Antonio's grown. And, for knowing Antonio, and once again, I reached out to Antonio because and then I apologize if I cut anybody off. I've known this man for going on 17 years. And so seeing him from punching holes in a wall because he's just that fiercely frustrated.
Don't nod your head, bro.
to now this super calm, well, not always calm, but the calmer version of Antonio. I think seeing the growth in a person from that point to this point, I think to your point, right? It's like we have to figure out like what's triggering us, what's causing those problems, and then two, how to properly release that frustration.
Mhm.
So I know you wanted to talk, bro.
Oh, it was actually to the point something that she was saying. I think one of the hardest things is even far as being diagnosed that I come into is that how do I say this properly? It's hard to go into an office with a white dude in front of you and discuss issues that you're going through because I think the experience of being a person of color in America is so unique that no matter how many years of PhDs they have, like you can't really relate anyway. So I'm going to tell you, and then what happens is I feel like we get looped into these boxes with everyone else, with our peers, with our white peers, and that's not even really what we're going through anyway because it's so layered and convoluted, just the experience itself. So that is the problem that I and
Everybody else.
yeah, man, maybe it is funny because it's been like maybe 3 or 4 of my friends are looking for new therapists and psychs, and they're like, and the one thing we kept saying back and forth is like, yo, where is all the Black mental health professionals at? Like you look, I mean, like you go online and you look and you go through and you're scrolling and you're like, none of them look like me anyway. Like, yeah. I don't want to go see Zane. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I think even Julian mentioned, I think during the men's conversation, right, was I think it's like 40% of the therapists out there are Black or people of color, right? And it may be less than that.
It's a lot less than that. I don't have the specific information, but it's a lot less than that.
40% is
less than 40%.
All right, about to say can't be 40%. Like where are they at?
So like, and like we have, but the thing is, in building this organization and doing some of our research, there are databases and resources now available to find people of color that are in the mental health space. But the problem is, if they're the head of the mental health space, a lot of the times they have MSW interns, right? So you may see the face of the organization, but the person you actually get may not be the person that is assigned to you for your intake. Yeah. And so unless you are like really specific, I need a person of color to really be able to provide me these services, you might run into someone outside of the demographics that you're looking for. And I mean, for me, I went from a Black male to a Hispanic woman. I felt like the Hispanic woman kind of understood me a lot better, and the Black male was kind of appeasing me, so to speak, right? Like I want to be held accountable for the things that I was going to therapy for, and I also felt like I wasn't being pushed enough, right? Gotcha. So I actively went and looked for a woman, like so. Hopefully, the entire organization were women. Hopefully, they were people of color. But Ashley and I were like, wow, all of a sudden, like. Black therapists. What's the other one called?
Melanin and mental health.
Melanin and mental health. So, what we're trying to do with this show and with the nonprofit is really develop a directory where we can either find the databases for y'all or identify specific providers that is going to cater to our community. Because the last thing we want to do is provide a platform for us to talk, but then after we talk, then what? Right. Yeah. And so the other piece of that is, all right, well, you like to work out, right? You go into a CrossFit gym. Well, wouldn't you like to go to an all Black CrossFit gym? Yeah. Right. Because there are different things that a Black CrossFit trainer would like suggest you do because our bodies move a little different, right? Versus everybody else. Nutritionist, right? Yeah. And you're going to CrossFit because you're trying to lose a little bit of weight or you're just trying to stay shape. We eat a lot of junk on a regular basis. Why not have a nutritionist or a healthy chef?
Yeah, I've been going through that actually with Tobias.
Right.
My non-Black nutritionist that I paid all this money for that I really just turned around and went to black nutritionist in like 2 seconds. I was like, dang, I gave you all this money.
Right. And so being able to, and the thing is like, we talk about maintaining, protecting our peace, right? If you look at our logo, it's a puzzle, right? Mental health is just one aspect of it. There's the finance, there's the health,
Mhm.
there's the medicine, there's the just your community. And being able to create this platform to build a community is one part of maintaining your peace. And the other aspect is finding other providers. Like if we could find people that, okay, well, Julian is licensed in Florida and New York, right, Julian?
No, just Florida right
Just
now.
Florida, right?
Mhm.
So we're like, look, all our Florida visit watchers, look, if you need somebody to do telehealth or what might have you, Julian might be your man, or you might be able to find somebody else. And so to dispel, or to kind of not dispel, to kind of like break that barrier to finding services, those are some of the things that we're definitely trying to do.
And I think that's because mental health barriers, I think they're the toughest to hop through to even get to that point. Because first of all, I think if you're going through something, the first case, well, obviously is just the communal
The stigma
ostracizing
behind, yeah.
internally. And so you jump through that part. And then you get to the next part is like, okay, well, now that I got through this, am I in denial about the things that I'm dealing with already? Maybe I don't even need it. And then it's like, well, I would really feel comfortable talking to someone that looks like me.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Then you get to that hurdle, and then it's almost like a funnel.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The top layer is just the bad internal communal. Then the next is the denial of dealing with what you're dealing with, and then it's finding someone that looks like you to actually deal with it. And then by that time, it almost cattle shoots to a point where you're like, you almost give up, maybe somewhere in
Right.
between.
It's so hard. It's
And you're
so hard.
forgetting a
It
layer,
makes it
right?
easier.
Because you're forgetting one more layer. So Julian may be out of everybody in Florida's care plan, right? So like you got to make sure that the last piece is, are you covered?
Yeah,
because if you're not
because most
covered,
aren't.
listen, because if you're not
Mhm.
covered, you go through that funnel. All right, I got 1,000 people, and then you said out of 1,000 is less than, like, out of 100 is less than 40. So I'm down to, like, let's say 25 to 30 practitioners. Then I need to find somebody that's licensed in my state. Then I'm down to like 10 practitioners. Then I need to find somebody that takes Aetna. I'm down to one.
And he doesn't
Right.
look like, and that one doesn't look like me.
Right,
And
right.
now I'm back at square one.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But
and
you
you
know
know
what?
what?
Another thing that not only I do have a comment I want to come back to this on the screen, but another thing that we kind of I wouldn't say it's ignorance, it's just that we don't know. Even when you sift through all of those people, you still got to find, if you're open to medication, you got to find who can write a prescription and who can't.
Mhm.
You got to figure out who can do what types of therapy. When I was going through my diagnosis and I was talking with my psychiatrist, and then I met with my therapist and she asked what kind of therapy, and I'm like, the kind
Mhm.
you give me, ma'am. Like, what are you asking me this for? Like,
Right.
I'm here to talk. What are you asking me? So I think um another branch of the organization is doing the education spiel, helping people know, helping people to understand, okay, once you get to where, okay, I need some help, I need to figure some things out. You got to figure out what you need to figure out, and that's the thing, that's a key piece that we're missing. Julian, you can go ahead with what you were going to say, and then I want
Yeah, just to address a few things. I know the question is like, where is everyone, right? And I've noticed from my experience, if we talk about master's level clinicians, a lot of master's level clinicians are in community mental health. They're underpaid, overworked, right? So they typically, a lot of them are unlicensed, and I've noticed that this cycle where these big organizations, they grab, they grab all of these therapists, and they don't support them in becoming licensed and working independently. So now they're stuck for years on end working in community mental health as an unlicensed therapist, which is not, it's a pre-licensed therapist, let me say that, not unlicensed, but there's no progression there. So that's why I think they all are. In terms of like doctoral level providers, psychologists, I did a quick lookup. It's 3% that are black. 3% that are black as of 2019. 7% Hispanic Latino.
Wow.
Um, so
Wow.
And at the doctoral so I started out in the master's level as a mental health and marriage and family counselor, and then when I made that transition over to the doctoral level, um, there's so many more barriers that you have to face and just nonsense that you have to deal with, and I can understand why no one would want to put up with that. So I think that that goes into those numbers, or the very low numbers of that representation.
So you have a better chance of like getting in a car accident than finding someone that looks like you
Yeah,
to do it.
Oh
Wow,
Yeah.
wow, that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
that's nuts. We gotta do better. We
yeah.
gotta do better, man.
Oh
Hmm.
man.
Oh,
Yes,
Uh,
indeed. I did want to ask. So, the next question I have here is, how do you think misdiagnosis affects this? But I also wanted to zoom in on Rhonda's
Hmm.
question about being afraid to get an actual diagnosis. I think this goes along with me, those like that like week where I was like, I can't be bipolar because bipolar is this and that's not me. Um,
Hmm.
how do you think we can, aside from having these conversations, getting the education out there? um, how do you think we can combat that stigma of worrying about your mental health being in your medical records, because your high blood pressure is in your medical records,
Hmm.
all of your lumps and bumps are in your medical records, your weight, your height, all of that is in your medical records. Why, how can we get the Black community to get past this particular thing being in their records?
so I just want to jump in real quick.
Hmm.
So there's so much already against us in the corporate environment, in firms. Like, we have to be 10 times better than our counterparts.
Hmm.
And it's already, if we're boisterous, we're seen as that angry or that, overpowering person. To add the fact that you may have you have a mental disorder or a mental condition, um, it make I can see why people are fearful, right? Because it's one of those where, oh, at any time Antonio's gonna pop off. But it's like, bruh, have you seen that from me? Now, on the
Mhm.
flip side, if somebody brings that out as something in conversation, they're in violation of your HIPAA privacy
Hmm.
at the workplace,
Mhm.
right? So, but the thing is, even going into it is like, do you almost don't want to give them that ammunition?
I kind of feel like it comes with the color of the paint anyway.
Mm,
You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like it doesn't really matter. Like you can be zen all the time, cool on the other side of the pillow, and because the way you look, it's an assumption. Like they're
mm,
like, oh, he's big, black, and burly. If I
Mhm.
if I drop something on his foot or something, he's gonna try to go upside my head. I think it
Hmm.
kind of comes with the territory anyway. So I kind of feel like, and then we're in like in a wild societal place because I mean I could freely say whatever.
right.
All right, and we're in a societal place where like white people in major in major society are making it non-taboo where everyone's all in for mental health now.
Right.
Right.
So because they're all in for mental health, then everybody's all in for mental health.
Mm,
Now it's the thing. No, don't get it twisted. It's good.
mm,
I mean, but like just like the issues we've dealt with forever, and really everybody, like
right.
even people like even white people dealt with forever have been considered, have been minimized. But now that it's like now it's grandstanding almost, like mental health is being pushed so hard that like maybe we're in a really good spot. You know?
I
I
think
mean,
I
but
think I think things are. I really do think things are changing, and I want to like bring everyone's attention back to something Ashley said when she said, "I can't be bipolar. I'm not one of those crazies." Right? That's the connection that we make right away. Bipolar, crazy.
Mhm.
Now you have the diagnosis, and this is no shade, but I really want to know: do you know what bipolar disorder is?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that was part of that getting over, like, I can't, I'm not
Hmm.
crazy, I'm not bipolar. I went
Hmm.
and looked up the symptoms. I went and looked up what exactly it is. And I'm reading, I'm like, this is every type A personality person that I know. People, high productive periods, not able to sleep, um, calling Paige in the middle of the night to be like, I got 3 show ideas. Do you know somebody who can do this, that, and the third?
Right.
Well, what about this campaign? Do you have a TikTok? Like, all of these things that I was doing, all of these things we're all doing, this rise and grind, and everything grind culture, everything just being on all the time until you're off. I remember we had a meeting one time, and I was who, I can't even remember who was talking to DJ D Ray. I think it was Paige, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm good. I'll sleep when I'm tired."
Mm.
but it's been 3 days since I slept a full
Red
night.
flag, red flag.
Right. It's like these little things, like I'm not thinking this is bipolar. I'm thinking
Right.
sometimes I'm productive and sometimes I'm not. We think that bipolar, I think I was watching a video. When people think of bipolar, they think of magnets and being repelling each
Hmm.
other with their opposite poles, but that's not what the disease is. And so now, as a person with it, my job is not only to advocate mental health, but I also have the added task of like I'm not just bouncing off the wall, you guys. We're probably all some aspect dealing with some of these characteristics, and you should probably look into it.
Right.
There's 5 tests you can take.
So
Yeah.
to Ashley's point, there would be nights where so we use Asana to manage all of our shows and all of our projects. I'll get like a hundred notifications. Ashley created this task for you. Ashley created this task for you. Ashley deleted this task. Ashley marked this task as complete. And we're talking about like now Ashley's 2 hours behind, an hour behind. So we're talking about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
And I'm like, does she not sleep? And apparently she doesn't. And a lot of the times I just took it as, Ashley's trying to do the best to make this show the best. But, looking back and knowing what I know now, I was like, oh, okay, okay. And, once again, knowing Ashley, she's done that a lot throughout the 3 years that we were working together. So it's just been like, all right, this is just Ashley, but not realizing this is
Mhm.
maybe a flag. Hey, I should be like, hey, Ashley, are you okay? What's going on?
Mhm.
And that's kind of like a follow up, right? Is
Mhm.
um, you know, how do you best so in going through this with Ashley, right? One of the things that I struggled with was like, how do I address or
Mhm. The
acknowledge
behaviors.
the behavior, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't like, like I said earlier, we were going back and forth, and there were times where I just walk away from the conversation, and I know that's rude, but it was like, but it was like the
Probably
only
the best
way.
thing at the time.
Right. The best thing at the time to avoid me saying something or her saying something that would be offensive to each other. And that's not who we are.
Mhm.
So the best option would to be let's walk away and then come back at it with a clear head. So like what would be the best way to kind of address somebody in a manic state like that, and kind of make them feel comfortable talking about where they are, and because like it literally took Ashley and I a moment of like, look, let's cut all this shit. Like, what's really going on with you? Because this is not the Ashley I knew 2 seasons ago.
Mhm.
And she really had to be like, all right, I forgot, my meds, I haven't been taking them. I'm getting diagnosed. In 10 days, I'll have answers for you. But for right now, I'm just all over the place. So we stopped production until we were able to get to a place where she was comfortable enough to come back and be like, all right, this is what I'm dealing with. I have my medication, and then we're in a good place. So like, how
That's
how do
it.
you ideally address somebody that's going through something like that?
Yeah, and this is something that I had talked about in a workshop that I had put on, a mental health workshop. It's difficult to have these conversations, and just like you, I had a very difficult time bringing this up to my wife because I didn't want to offend her and all these things. And it took me to say, like, hold up, like, I'm doing her a disservice by not saying anything. This is, you know, this is my person. I need to say something. And quite frankly, the best way to navigate is to be direct. I know in the back of our minds at times we're wondering, like, are we going to offend them? Are we going to hurt them? What's going to happen? And yeah, things may happen. At least we know that something was said about it. Everything is put on the table. So just us getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Hmm. You have something to say? No? Cool. Cool. Um, so with that being said, are, would you say, Julian, there are telltale signs that a person is in, you know, and what is it technically considered, right? Are they manic or in a bipolar state? Like, what's the
Right.
proper term to use? Because that's the other part we want to do with the show is
Yeah.
properly address and, you know, grow our vernacular as it relates to the mental health space.
Right. So with bipolar disorder, there's two types. There's one and two. Essentially, both of them consist of having you have to have met the criteria for a major depressive disorder, and you also have hypomanic or manic state. That's that elevated period, that grandiosity, the risk-taking behaviors,
Euphoric.
uh, and that's typically that goes through certain periods. So I think that the media and TV shows and just like kind of like colloquial talking, we have misrepresented what bipolar disorder is. We think that it's back and forth. That's what we would consider. That's a specifier called rapid cycling, which is extremely rare according to research. So what bipolar disorder looks like typically is like someone will have a period of depression, right? And um, we know what depression can look like. It's different between anyone, and sometimes at times they have a hypomanic or a manic episode, which is the hypomanic. The best way to put it is it's a little less severe than a full blown manic episode. It's less of that criteria. So that's what bipolar disorder is. It's not someone just flipping, the switch off and on. It's going through these periods of depression and hypomania or mania. It doesn't really go back and forth.
And so, are people typically going through? Is it like a wave, like ebbs and flows, or I guess yeah. Is it
Yeah,
like an ebb and flow depending on what's going on?
yeah, on average, I would say that's a good way to put it. It's an ebb and flow. Like, of course, there's a period where you're okay. Like, you're pretty stable depending on the type of work you're doing, like therapy and or medication. But it typically like ebbs and flows. Again, having that depressive period, and then maybe being okay, and then kind of having some manic symptoms and kind of going back. But that's a typical progression of it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like there's triggers that sometimes like once you know it and you pay attention, there are things that I don't usually do. Like about a month ago, I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning and cleaned everything. Just randomly clean everything,
Hmm.
messaging page. We was on. I think we were on. What's the app? With it's not Cookout, whatever the app is.
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse. Yes, we were on Clubhouse, listening to stuff, having a whole conversation, and then I was like, "Oh shit, it's coming." So
You felt it.
okay, so what's gonna happen? When is it gonna happen? And then boom, the low. So now that I know that this is happening, I can make a note and then make sure I let my psychiatrist know. And then she wants to know what all was happening at that time.
Hmm.
What happened? What was the trigger? What was the catalyst for the low? And then one of the things I saw that was common was when people are diagnosed with bipolar disorder or mania, any either severity of mania is to get with a cognitive behavioral therapist. And so, cognitive behavior therapists help you work through the mindset, work through the thought processes that kind of triggered the mania in the first place. So now you go through those ebbs and flows, you feel it coming because you start doing those things, and then have to mentally kind of reprogram your brain in addition to medicine, because medicine has been
Hmm.
like being on the meds. And I was literally coming off a period where I was like, not only did I not have my meds, but I had did some research because the internet is out there, and I had this stack of vitamins and
Hmm.
supplements that I was going to take because they the same thing. It's the SSRI, so I should be good. I was not good. Me and Paige was canceling meetings left and right because I just could not. He
Right.
just could not, and then mistakenly diagnosed, and now everything is flowing. We have productive meetings. Everything like is night and day. In a,
So let me ask you a question, Ashley. Like, um, so one of the things that I've been trying to do is journal, right? Like, because I'm working through some things and figure journaling, whether it's a voice memo or just writing it down, I get to kind of reflect on it at the end of the week. Have you guys tried journaling to see whether or not you can see where you were up, down, where you were angry, why you were angry? Because you know, a lot of times we don't get a chance to go back in time and see like, oh, at that point there was so much going on that's what led me, because like I said, let me go back to you, Antonio. A lot of the times, right, um you know, it's the things that you couldn't control that pushed you to that limit. Like looking back now, and not to say you're diagnosed as bipolar, but like you had anger management issues, right? And you know, similarly, were you able to go back and look back and be like, I could have probably addressed that differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's weird is I kind of think a part of it too was also my maturity level. I mean, not just, I mean, like overall, like age, but emotional maturity. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like just being able to like process everything. And I think that I don't know, maybe I think it's the ways that I was, you know, kind of brought up by fire. The best way to deal with it, the best way to deal with things with rage, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, like I mean, and you get, I mean, obviously you get to a point besides the therapy where you're like, I mean, I can't do this all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
can't like I can't physically do it. One, that's just low. Two, two, like it's a strain on me just carrying it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like just I mean, and three, and probably most important, it doesn't make me happy in the long run. You end up hurting people or hurting things, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to be there. So I mean, I think that I don't. I think the easy cop out would be to say that I was a product of my environment. And I think that going through those issues, going through those things, and kind of recapping in therapy, I think it really helped get
Yeah.
me to where I'm at now. I
Nice.
mean, really just kind of building from it, and just I think facing truths. You know, just like okay, this is that. Well, this is how we got to deal with it. And I mean, it. What to say it minimally, I think the more you do and the better you do in life, the easier it is to deal with it. And I mean, and I say that in like, now there's bigger risks. When I'm 19 and I'm 20 and I'm 21 and
Right.
I'm not thinking past next week,
Right.
and I'm broke all the time and I'm a college student, and I'm like, it's easy to not think about like what is the repercussion for my actions, because I'm not even thinking past next week.
Right.
But now,
Plus, at that time, you're playing football. It's all testosterone, all aggression.
yeah,
So you either, and at this point, you know, by the time we met, you were kind of off the team. Well, not off the team, but you weren't really playing.
yeah, I was phasing out.
Right.
I was phasing out, and that's another part too, man. It's that like, I mean, that was big. I mean, when you do something your entire life and then you get put on a pedestal, like being at a top 20 football school, and then all of a sudden you can't do it no more.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you lose your sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And then you're just, I mean, you kind of just whirl up in a whirlwind of like, okay, well, what is my purpose? What I'm trying to do? The structure that, I mean, you're really like a machine. Yeah. So you're structured all day. Everything is by a schedule. Like I'm meeting at this time. I got to lift at this time. I got class at this time. I got to go practice at this time. And then when that structure goes, and then your sense of self-worth goes, and not to mention, you know, you've been running into people at full force trying to knock their head off, and plus the age and the environment, you're like, you're all over.
Yeah,
and I
it's not
think,
sustainable.
yeah, and as you get older, I think for me, but besides obviously, well, first and foremost was the actual therapy and help. But like as you get older, you're like, yeah, the stakes are higher. You know, like the stake.
You think
the stakes,
twice and three
yeah.
times about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, like even not too long ago, man, I felt tried. And I'm looking at them, and then I'm like, but now I'm analyzing a bunch of different things. I'm like, okay, well, it's past 2020, so you can really get shot for no reason. Like you can get shot for not. Like, I mean, you can get shot for nothing then, but like I think like that mental health hold on people in society being kind of bunkered down for a year and a half really did a number on people. So now you can really get shot for honking. It's like for honk the horn at somebody, man. You might catch a bullet. So now I'm like. And then I gotta like sit, analyze, take a deep breath, and I'm like, then I try to rationalize it in my head. I'm like, well, what am I gonna lose for waiting another 3 minutes for this dude to make this turn? What am I gonna do by waiting another 2 minutes? Or like, hey, you know, this dude got an attitude. Realistically, what do I gotta prove to anybody? I'm never gonna see this guy again in my life.
Mm.
Who cares? Like I'll be a punk in that aspect. I'm like, bro, like what? Maybe get ran up on by your dudes and maybe get stabbed or shot or jump for what? I don't even care anymore. I'm never gonna see you again.
Mm.
Like I don't know you, and I've really put myself in almost like a bubble where like even the people I deal with on a daily basis, like we're all on the same stuff. I mean, I talk to you.
Mm.
I mean, I talk to Jay like when he's doing, he's not being, a mad scientist. I talk to him, but like I talk to people that I've noticed like it's almost like the herd thins out.
Right.
Like you're only really dealing with people just like you,
Right.
and those people hopefully push you to like do more and do better.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
And not do more in the sense of distracts you from what you need to work on yourself. Right. We kind of push you to work on yourself, and make sure that, because I mean, we look back at our younger selves and you're like, damn, we could have done things a whole lot better.
yeah.
So yeah. So
She didn't know.
Yeah.
And then, and another part of it, the biggest part of it, really, like, and it just dawned on me, really, is the acceptance part.
Mm.
Accepting you,
Yeah.
accepting you for who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's certain things that like you just couldn't get around. Like you were 19, you were like, damn, if I'd have did this and I could have did that different. But you were a baby. I mean, I want to say what the frontal lobe of the male brain doesn't fully develop till you're 25.
Right.
Like the decision-making factor of the brain. So you're not even really an adult till you're like 25, 27.
Yeah.
So in between time, you're really just like a machine with like a P in there doing whatever.
Young,
So-
dumb, and full of, you know what I mean?
So yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So I do have a question. So because you mentioned it, I understand that you kind of were using that product of your
Environment.
environment thing, and I know we've all been paying attention to the news lately. Um that on top of Black people's issue, mental health, on top of the diaspora, translated slave trade, all of those things, and then now we're I don't want to go too deep into it because I really don't want to change the tone too much. Um, with all of that and all of the stress and drama, that's triggering. I made a mistake and watched the video yesterday and literally had to like go and do a meditation because I'm like, wait, I don't need this right now. I did not.
Mhm.
Um, how do how do we continue to combat the stigma of mental health while also knowing that the trigger is just it can be seeing one of them or just fearing like any day could be the day I step outside of my apartment and that's the day.
Uh, uh, I, I think that it's one of the things where like I hate to say it, but you can't save everybody.
Mm.
You know, like you can't. Like I was just not even mental health. It was something I was talking to my friend about, and he's like, man, I really am trying to lose weight and trying to get in the gym. And I'm like, so go. And he's like, I'm gonna get to it. And I'm like, well, okay, well, and my man was like, bro, like, why don't you take him with you? I'm like, why am I gonna take somebody that doesn't really? I mean, they say they want to go,
Right.
they really don't want to go, and
Mhm.
until they want to go,
Mhm.
like for me to get to this point, like I had to want to get to this point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like I had to want to do that. I had to put the effort and the steps in order for me to get to this point. So the reality is that like I mean I'll talk about it and it might make people uncomfortable, but sometimes like mental health is one of the things that's like it's almost like the hidden secret that we all deal with.
Yeah.
There's really
Mhm.
no way around it, and
Yeah.
and then in some form or fashion we're dealing with something, and our community really ostracizes and makes
Yeah.
it makes it hella taboo. So
And another thing, Tone, just to go off of what you're saying, to put another word to it, vulnerability, right? I think
absolutely.
that is the key in reducing the stigma. So, shows like this, right? Saying, yeah, I have bipolar disorder. You deal with that. Like, I've dealt with depression. I'm still on, meds for depression, and I treat people doing that, and I'm not ashamed of it. And just being vulnerable, putting yourself out there, and normalizing it. I think that's going to be. It's a work in progress, but as if all of us continue to be vulnerable and lend an ear to one another, I think we'll start to see that stigma within our communities decrease over time.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I want to add something to what Tone was saying and kind of take it in maybe a little different direction. Like, we can't protect everyone from being triggered, right? Like, some people have to work through that in order to be able to heal. Like, it's like, riding a bike. If you only think about falling, right, you're never going to learn how to really ride a bike, because part of the process of learning how to ride a bike, unless you have a really mean parent, right, is, look, you're going to fall, but you got to get back up and keep going. And I think maybe last season, one of our guests was like, I really wish you would have asked us, harder questions, because, I think the audience needs to know more. And our response was, we were afraid of asking something that would have triggered a past trauma,
Mhm.
right? And it's a weird place for us to live, because we're not sure of what we're gonna say that's gonna trigger the person.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, is it are we doing our audience justice avoiding conversations that could potentially trigger someone?
Mhm.
Right. No, I appreciate that you say this. One approach that I have, like just a mind frame. Let's say anyone's dealing with any type of trauma. Whatever you're saying is not going to hurt them more than they've been hurting themselves, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking about it all the time, for the most part, or majority of the time. So yeah, if you say something, sure, it might trigger up those emotions, but it's unlikely that you bringing up this topic is going to cause more harm, because it's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
So not being afraid to bring up these topics is important. And I understand, like we try our best to, like always, I've talked about this, like it's always good for people to approach others from a trauma informed perspective, which means like you're assuming someone else has dealt with the trauma. But that's where you ask questions, you be curious, you're curious, try to learn about people. That's what seems to be very helpful. But like avoiding it altogether, we're also doing the masses a disservice, just because we're afraid that someone might be triggered. It is difficult, but I think that again, we just gotta be more curious, more inquisitive, and just genuine, right? Like I'm asking these things to help you and to help myself.
Mhm.
I kind of, it's funny because we were talking about numbers, and there's something that we all have in common is we have a certain degree of higher education, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm learning though too, and it kind of goes back to what I said about not being able to save everybody.
Hmm.
You were Jules, you're talking about numbers in the beginning. You're talking about 3% of people of color are actually in that field. And what's wild is that, like, I'll break it down even more, and it's something that really kind of blew my mind the other day, because I was reading something about the average asset income of black households, like compared to their white counterparts. I think it's like 125 for a white family to like
Mm.
$17,500. So just to break this down more, in America we make up about 13% of the U.S. population. Us on this call right now, we make up about 5 to 7% of that population, because we actually went further than high school.
Mm.
On top of that, for those, Jules is like a white spotted owl, man, because he's like 2% of 13% of the entire population. So, having said that, having a certain degree of higher education is more inclining you, because you either went somewhere to do it, or even if you did it online, you have to learn how to teach yourself. That's essentially what it is. So you're more inclined to be like, you know what? I'm realizing I have a problem. I realize I have to look into this problem in order to fix myself and take the step. So now we have another 9% of the population of our already small community as a whole that hasn't. They won't, and they haven't had the privilege to be able to do that for whatever reason. So they have to go about, when we're talking about product my environment, they stayed in that and didn't. So now it's like, how do we help them out? It's kind of like almost you have to go back into it
Right.
and pull them out because like it's funny because we were talking about like the people you keep, the people like in my circle, how I talk to my friends that from around the way, like my environment, and I'll talk about things like this. I'm like, yo, man, I know you've really been going through it. You talk about talking to a therapist. What? You'd have thought I called their mom the P word. You would think that like I really hurt them. And I'm like, bro, like, what's the issue? And then you have to and then you have to like almost deconstruct that thing. And you're like, well, bro, like you haven't even really been exposed to that. Because as soon as you were done, either you went through what you went through and then you started working, and that's what you've been doing. Right. You haven't even been exposed to different groups of people. You might not have even left the block, you might have left the city.
Right.
So then how am I? It's an exposure. It's exposure time, but it's really weird because, like I said, just to talk to your numbers point, you don't realize until you put the numbers together, and you're like, damn, like we're really like almost elitist in this aspect, man. Like, and we don't even realize it because all of our conversations are with each other. Like we're having this conversation with each other, and we're all kind of like, okay, we already grasp these concepts, right? But you don't realize that like we have 9% of the population that's like,
And you know what? That brings me to something. So I had a conversation earlier today. A colleague of mine within the community that I'm in the tech space reached out, was like, yo, I need to talk to you. And, you know, just listening to him talk, he identified himself just by his job, right? And he was like, you know, I'm not having a good time with my job, this, that, and the other. So, you know, me, not a therapist, but just asking basic questions like, hey, like, what's your life like outside of work, right? Because your job doesn't technically identify you. And, you know, I was like, and he would give me these other things that like busy things to do. And I was like, are you happy? Right. And I think it was the first time anybody asked him that. He was like, no, I've been in a really bad place. I was like, all right, let's take a couple of steps back. You're talking about your job. They're not treating you the right way. You're talking about clients that you have on the side hustle is not treating you the right way. Have you taken inventory of what are some things that I could have done to improve all of those situations? Number two, have you asked yourself, like, what is it that I can control? It was, you got to realize that there are things that you can control, right? And the things that you can control, you can determine how you react to people based on what they say to you. And I was like, and like long story short, I got to him, I talked to him, I was like, have you ever thought of talking to somebody, like a specialist? He's like, no, I don't think. I was like, by the sounds of things, you're not happy with your job, you're not happy with your side hustle, you're not happy with life. Maybe you should talk to somebody. And you know, he was like, because I actually said something really, something that sounded like it triggered him. I was like, look, your employer doesn't really give a fuck about you. He just wants you to produce, do your job, and because we're African American, we're expected to do twice as much work as our counterparts. And you're lucky because a Black woman has to work 4 times as hard to make sure that they can be acknowledged like their counterparts. And he was like, you're like the second person that told me they don't give a fuck about me. I'm like, look, they don't care about Black boy joy. Right? It's like, you got to figure out how to make that work. You got to figure out how to make you happy before you expect the job to appreciate you the way they want to. I'm like, look, go into your job. You got to work twice as hard. If they're not training you, go figure out how to do the thing yourself. If your clients aren't, you know, treating you a particular way, you don't need them. You know what I mean? I think a lot of times the best thing I got out of therapy was control what you can control. Everything and everybody around you, you can't do nothing about that. How you react to people, how you treat people, how you progress in life is really kind of on you. Now, the other sides of things, when they react, you can't expect somebody to say no when you ask for a raise. I bet you either stay or you go find another job. I mean, there are different ways to react to it. So I say all that to say it's like you're right. Like, he's from a particular town, has never left the town, and his perspective is everybody's doing this. Why am I not?
Yeah, and I think it's something I tell clients too, man. And might throw everybody off, but selfishness is not bad. Like, I mean, I'm in an industry where kids that come from adjunct poverty literally win the lottery. Like literally, it's like I know where I'm gonna get picked at. And then when I hit that number, 16, 17, I'm guaranteed like, I don't know, $15 million. Coming from a house where no one in the house made more than 20, right? So the first thing, and it's something I think that we all, people of color, I think we're all guilty of. And it's only because we're minimized so much societally, is that like we always want to reach back and help. We always want to help. So we're like, it's almost like a trigger because our counterparts won't.
Right.
Like they're kind of built on a society where there is tiers. There's upper class, middle class. If you're not up there, then we got nothing to talk about. But I think what I really try to perpetuate, and it kind of throws them off, I'm like, yo, bro, selfishness is good to the degree, because if you're not selfish with yourself, who you are, your brand, your finances, your mental health,
who's looking out for you?
Yeah, no one else is going to be. Everyone around is gonna pull and take and pull and take, and now you look up 5 years later, you're being audited, you ain't got no money, and you're not in the NFL anymore because the average lifespan is what, 2.5 years?
Yeah.
So, all right, now I've been doing this and I've been put on a pedestal for my entire life and doing it at the most highest professional level. I was getting paid $1 million to play a game, like a game. Like we're not cracking atoms here. We're not cutting people open. We're playing a game and I'm getting paid millions of dollars. And then overnight, I'm done. And now I'm just regular whoever, and my mental health is shot. My finances are shot. I wasn't selfish at all. So to your point, I think it's something that we actually have to get rid of the stigma of what selfishness is.
Right.
And I think we have to be selfish with ourselves, because if we don't, no one else is going to be. Like if I'm not selfish about my mental health, like I'm going to take this time for me to work on me, do better, and this is how I'm going to do it. And no one cares. The people that you work for don't care. They're looking for the product, and so definitely.
And I like that point. So I Travel Tuesday happy hour. Yep, shameless plug. So on my travel show, I try to understand how people move around, right? And I like to travel in groups, primarily because the trip is organized. I don't have to worry about no planning. But luckily for me, a lot of the groups, we kind of convene over either a Zoom meeting before we go on the trip. And I typically tell everybody, look, I may disappear from time to time because I need time to myself, and because I get overstimulated and I shut down. I'd rather not shut down in front of a whole bunch of strangers than just, all right, take myself back to my room and recharge. So
same thing,
that's definitely important that, even if you're traveling as a group, you don't need to be with them 24/7. If you're in I know Ashley talked about going to a networking event, and I can't imagine how her anxiety was like on 1,000. Oddly enough, when I do these things, my anxiety is on 1,000, but I have to fight through it. I have to work through it. You know what I mean? We can't continue to avoid things that, like Julian said, make us uncomfortable, because only then do we grow and become better versions of ourselves.
And if I also may interject there, another thing that's important to ask ourselves and our friends: who am I? Who are you? And that's another question that we're not asked. We don't know who we are, what we do, what we like, right? What makes us happy, unhappy, and just getting to know ourselves, developing a relationship with ourselves is a good place for us to start. Just asking that question. We can, write it on. I typically have, like, at the second session, almost all of my patients, I do this. I ask them, I want you to go home, write who am I on the top of the paper, and let it flow. And we go from there, because not only do I get to know about them, but they get to really know about themselves. And it's 3 words that can make a big difference.
Right. So I want to kind of, and this has been amazing. I appreciate you all for jumping on. I want to kind of continue with this next question, which is, how do we continue to educate our community around the different levels or the different aspects of mental health, right? Whether it be disorders, illnesses, how do we continue to do that? Because it would be amazing to have brothers like yourselves kind of create articles or join shows like the State of the Black Men's Mental Health, another shameless plug, where we kind of continue to talk about things. And Julian, being able to increase our vernacular around mental health is very key, because uh, disorder may not be the proper term used for everything, right?
Mhm.
Illness may not be the proper thing used for everything. So I think that's one thing. I think we need to find what are better ways that we can do to educate the community around just mental health in general.
Yeah, and one of my LBs and I, when we put on that workshop, we tried our best to kind of deconstruct what depression looks like, anxiety, substance misuse, what that looks like. Even educating people, like, yeah, now we don't say substance abuse, we say misuse, right? Because
Mhm.
abuse indicates that you're doing something
Something
wrong
wrong.
when there's
Mhm.
the actual issue there.
Mhm.
So I'll speak for myself. I think, well, like, what I can do is that, like, deconstruct what it looks like, how it appears, so that we can be just on the lookout for those signs. And another thing we talked about too, I think you just mentioned it, is like, how do we get help? Um, there's so many different levels of therapists, right? Licensed mental health counselors, marriage and family therapists, social workers, psychologists, and psychiatrists, and knowing what they all do. So I again, just to come back around, like, if I'm speaking just for myself, I think it's my responsibility to just take what I know and deconstruct it and make it easier for all of us to understand, instead of being afraid of all of these terms, and even going to a therapist, and just educating people on who does what, and simply saying, like, there doesn't need to be anything wrong to work on yourself either. You can see a therapist just because it's like, I just want to talk to someone just to gain more insight. um, these are all the things that we can do, and all the ways that we can utilize it. So but it can be difficult for, like, just the average person, right? Like, you see all these bipolar disorder and this and depression. um, I don't know exactly what type of, like, database or website we can go to, because, if we go on the internet, you look up depression, automatically you have stage 3 cancer in some house.
Yeah.
So I don't have an answer for that, but maybe that's another project, right? Like, really deconstructing what it looks like, just to better educate people.
Yeah, and we would definitely love to partner with you, your grad chapter, in kind of doing something together where we can kind of like continue that conversation. I know our fraternity has a mission, and we could probably that could be something we could take over to the state of the Black man's mental health, where we can have a safe space for men to be able to talk about these different things. Because let's be honest, between the um, the community not accepting it, men being tuned with their emotions, men being tuned with their selves, being able to be selfish, that's definitely something that's difficult, right? Because what you tell me, something's wrong with you. You're supposed to be the strongest person in the household, but you have a
Hmm.
disorder or you have something
Makes
going
you
on,
automatically weak.
it makes you automatically weak. And that's another way that society finds a way to emasculate the Black man. You know what I mean? And so I would definitely love to kind of sit down with you and see if we could plan out the next session
Yeah.
and kind of go from there.
And
And
I
another, just to throw this in there, something that we can do starting now, instead of saying, like, I have bipolar disorder, I have depression, we can talk about, like, I struggle with these types of issues. I struggle with depression and mania, right? Like, not using the word disorder, not using all of these buzzwords, but just letting people know exactly what it is that you're struggling with, so that
Mhm.
you can better relate to people. I struggle with, not not sleeping for 3 days at a time and still being super active. It's like, me too. It's like that you could connect with someone like that, as opposed to saying, yeah, I'm manic. They may not know what that looks like. So
Yeah,
that's a
vulnerability.
way.
Vulnerability is big, man. I think
Yeah.
it's funny. Me and
Key.
one of Jules' line brothers actually we're in a text group, and one thing that I've noticed that we've all been doing is really just like, yo, how's your mental?
Mm-hmm.
Very simple question. Like, yo, how's your mental, man? How? Because it's funny because you think about, like, what do dudes talk to each other about?
Yeah.
And the last, absolutely, like the big 3 or 4, right? So besides that, like, I mean, I think that us, I mean, obviously having the advantage of being in that space where we're all kind of thinking the same way and we kind of all move the same way. It's a little thing is like, yo, man, how's your mental doing? I was like, because, and you'd be surprised how people will open up.
Yes.
Like it, because the people aren't usually even, they're not used to being even asked that by like their significant other in the house.
Right.
Like, how's your mental? You know, like what, you know, whatever, man. How's your mind? Like, funny thing, like we got in this. There's like 12 of us in the group chat, and like I learned that like out of 12 of us, 4 of our mothers were incarcerated, which is wild because we didn't. And I've been friends with them. I've known these people since 2006, and I didn't. And I've lived with some of them, lived next to some of them, and I'm like, damn, why I never thought about you? Like we share, and it's funny because we share common traits, even little things that we do because of coming from these certain things. And just by asking like, yo, how have you been? How's your mental? And certain topics are coming up, and we're just like, yeah, me too. Or like, yeah, I feel that way. And you're like, damn, I didn't know your mom went to college too.
Right.
You know, like, I mean, you don't realize these things. And so I think the big thing is just being verbal, man. Just asking the simple question. And it's not a, sometimes I feel like the easiest answer is the most obvious answer. Yeah, man, how you doing? How's your mental? I mean, I'll just ask that, like, how's your mental? Like, how you feeling? Yeah. Good? I mean, tell me how you feeling.
And the crazy part is, and not crazy, the odd part is, there's this trend on social media, you know, show me a time where you were at your lowest. And people are just dropping, like they're turning up and everything is happening. But, you know, that was the point that they were lowest because, you know, we got to maintain the appearances, right? And regardless of what we're going through, a lot of us have to maintain a particular appearance. I remember reaching out to one of the bros, who I periodically hit him up just to see how he's doing. And he was like, yo, bro, I'm in like a bad place right now. I'm working through some things, lost family members. I was like, dang, like I need to reach out more often just to check up on people. Because it's like, it's easy to be in somebody's town, like, yo, dog, like what's going on? Where's the turn up? But like, just to ask a person, how are you doing? Like, no, like really, how are you doing? Like, check up on your good friends. Like, we all think our good friends are good, like, or our strong friends are good. You know, don't hesitate to reach out and be like, hey, how are you doing? Because like you said, a simple question like that, that could be like a 15-second conversation
or a 2-hour
a 2-hour conversation.
A lot of us, I was gonna say, a lot of us are resilient, right? And then we look at, like you said, you know, you check up on your good friends. Resiliency is exhausting. So yeah, I know whatever is thrown at me, I know I'm gonna be good because I've faced it before and I have a framework to handle it. That doesn't take away from the fact that while it's happening, I'm exhausted, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, and like, you know, and we need to lean on each other just to vent, to get it out. So I really appreciate that you said that, because that's another group of people that go unheard, right? The people who are good.
Yeah, and like I keep saying that, but like you would really be shocked because people are guarded. But especially if you know someone for years, you'd be shocked by just asking how's your mental, how you feeling. You would be shocked at like how much people actually want to unpack that shit.
Yeah,
especially like if they are not seeing someone professionally, and there is that degree of trust because you've known them for like almost 2 decades. They're very quick to be like, "Well, let me tell you what the hell is going on with me," and then you're just like,
and that could change everything.
Yeah, and you're
that's a huge burden that they've been carrying, and like just something that they've been carrying for themselves. And now that you're at least able to talk about it, that's a great segue, because that's kind of what this show is about, right? Is providing people with a safe space to be able to kind of have these conversations, to let it out. You know, we touch on topics that we know people are going through or have someone in their lives that's gone through it and are able to talk about it, right? And showing our people that throughout the diaspora, there's nothing wrong with seeking help. There's nothing wrong with talking about what you're going through, because you never know who else is going through it that see themselves in you.
Yes.
And so, with that being said, I definitely appreciate you both for joining the show. Ashley, you want to wrap up?
I appreciate y'all too. um, thank y'all so much for joining. I appreciate your vulnerability. I can't wait to catch that episode of the State of the Black Man's Mental Health. Um, before I start my wrap up, do y'all have anything coming up that you want to share with the viewers? Any
Nothing
anything?
in particular now. No.
Okay.
Okay. Oh,
Okay, just making sure I give y'all the opportunity before we see y'all again next
okay.
month on the State of Black Men's Mental Health. Next week we're gonna have our debut episode of the Women's Series, which is gonna be the Wellness Collective. If you know of sisters, let her know. Tune in. We're gonna be talking about some good stuff. Graphics coming soon. Again, thank y'all very much for tuning in. And one last reminder, anybody watching, if you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on so you can catch all of these good shows. You can catch this symposium we're gonna have when we get with Dr. Vibes and do this breaking down of talking about mental health. Thank you, Latoya, for tuning in. Thank all of y'all for tuning in. We'll see y'all again in 2 weeks. This has been getting my cheese back on my cracker.
All right, y'all. Take care.
Take care.